Well, the Shea brothers have gathered to pay tribute to our father today, so this could be shared with all of you at the Argus Foundation dinner tonight. We're so happy to have the honor to do that, and that he has been given this honor. I know that he would be happy, but at the same time, he was a private guy and he wasn't out for the publicity. He led by example. He was somebody who taught persistence, hard work, and honesty, and finish what you start.
I mean, other than my mom and dad, no one taught me more than Jack Shea. I mean, he taught me, you know, I don't dress like Jack, but I mean, he taught about being professional. He talked about looking people in the eyes. He talked about shaking hands with a firm handshake. Taught me about business. Taught me about how to make money, and I don't think I'll ever forget him for that. He was just excellent. He had a knack of pushing others to the forefront, including me. He was a support person. He just made you and elevated you. I saw him do it, and I didn't even grasp that he was doing this to me until I'd say after he died, and I realized that he did it with his wife, he did it with his children, did it with people who were involved in Sarah Bay Country Club. They would go to Jack for ideas and for knowledge, and he never looked to become president. He always looked to be the man behind the president.
John Joseph Shea, alias Jack Shea, alias Big D as we call him in the family. That's a long story on how he got the name Big D. I really gave it to him, but my other brothers think they gave it to him too. But we had a great life growing up in Sarasota. You know, luckily my dad in 1958 decided he was going to come to Florida and Sarasota and start the branch office of our family accounting firm, Shea and Company, along with my grandfather Norman the First and my uncle Norman Jr. Soon after that, things started booming in Sarasota as they had predicted. You know, they helped broker the deal with John Ringling North and Arthur Vining Davis from Arvida to develop Longboat Key and Bird Key. We had a great time growing up in Sarasota. My dad taught us a lot about life and how to do things. One of his major criterion though was that we had to be independent. You know, so be independent in what you do and how you thought, and don't let anybody sway you or turn you in a different direction, which was good for all of us.
In the early days when I first moved down here, it was what I'd call the Jack and June Shea show, and one would play off another. Jack would start a sentence and June would finish it or change it, and they just had a wonderful, wonderful relationship, and carried on for a number of years and entertained a lot of people, actually, and including me.
He also made sure that you brought your friends to the house so he could meet them. Never was, questioning about where they were going to go and what they were going to do. He just wanted to know who they were, because he knew that if you show me your friends, I'll tell you who you are. And he believed that friendship was key to being successful in life. He also thought that encouraging young people to reach their highest goals was important. And if anybody would ever ask him or tell him that I can't do that or nobody's ever done it, he would always recite a poem that he had memorized by Edgar Guest on somebody said it couldn't be done, something that was he lived by. He also believed that an education was very important for development in a person's life, and that whatever you may choose to be, a plumber, an electrician, a CPA, an attorney, that once you got that ticket, it was something that you had for the rest of your life and nobody could take away from you. Dad was a businessman in Sarasota for over 65 years, and he was a very honorable person. He did everything by the book. He worked hard for his family and his friends. So I tip my hat to Dad for being a guy who could mix business and friendship together, but friendship was what made him special.
It was 1980, and Jack Shea and I went through the class to become members of the Elks Lodge 1519. And we did that for several weeks and became members. Neither one of us got blackballed, thank goodness. So at the very beginning, they showed where you came in the front door and you could have fine dining. There was entertainment, dancing. You could go up the chairs, get involved in and if you wanted to become an exalted ruler, you could study for that. And then if you didn't want anything like that and you didn't want to go into the fine dining and dancing, they had another entryway you could use your card in the rear of the building, and it was right inside. As soon as you opened the door, you were inside the bar. And the bar was full of smoke. You could cut it with a knife, but it was a lot of fun. And of course, he was a large member of the Elks for so many years, from 1980 up until his passing. But if you think about it, where the Community Foundation is now, it's where the Elks Lodge 1519 used to be.
Jack came to me about 25 or maybe it was even 30 years ago and said that he and some folks were going to put together a community foundation here locally. And I thought, well, here's another one of Jack's, I don't know, follies, if you want to call it. I don't really think we need a community foundation, and I don't think they're going to raise very much money.
Started with 0 assets, and through the work of many supporters over the last 40 years, our assets now have a value in excess of $420 million. In addition, obviously, to being one of the 9 founders, he was very active in the foundation for the entire almost 40 years before he passed away. He was a very strong supporter. He encouraged his clients to look into supporting the community foundation. And many of Jack's clients over the years made significant contributions to the community foundation, established many donor-advised funds with the foundation, and consequently, many people have contributed to the community foundation based upon the encouragement they receive from their CPA, Jack Shea.
So Jack was right and Ray was wrong.
Sort of his legacy to me is service. You've heard about the things that boards and everything that he served on, but Resurrection House was an important commitment for him for many years. And his time was not just in funds or organization, but it was in hands-on work with people, and he did a lot of this anonymously. It would be hard to pinpoint what thing was the most important to him. I'd say that he was a man for all seasons. He was a man who had contingency for every thing that he worked on, always had a plan B, but he always pulled everything off with great elegance and great class.
Many will be surprised to know that until Jack's death, he continued to be an active Florida real estate agent and did deals every year, at least one, until the year he died. Always involved, would call me and say, hey, I've got something coming up. And sure enough, a month later, 2 months later, he'd come and say, I've got a contract. Just great. He was, again, in his 90s, and he was still doing deals. And again, that was Jack Shea, never a quitter. Always on it, always knew his stuff, and so friendly with that just incredible smile. I'll just never forget him. A great guy.
Jack had a small boat. We had a big boat, and they would come for the weekend, and we would go to Tampa, to St. Pete. But Jack always made a menu before we left in a notebook. He figured out what days we were going to be gone and what we should have for different meals. And then he purchased the food, and then he brought the food on board, and he would cook in the galley. Well, when we were on the smaller boat, he said to my husband, Dan, if you're going to want me to be the chef here, you'd better get a bigger boat. Well, Dan went and bought a bigger boat. We'd ended up with a 54-foot Hatteras. And Jack was happy in the galley. And June and I stayed out of the galley, and Dan would drive the boat. And then when we would go down, we would clean up, But the funniest one was, I went down there one day after he'd been in the galley, and here's a brown paper bag in the middle of the galley. I said, "What's this?" Well, he said, "That's the garbage." And when I looked in at that time, this colander, which is like a big sieve, I don't know what he used it for, but he must have used it for something. We hadn't looked, I guess the colander would have gone in the garbage. That's how we survived when we were on the judges' chambers.
Our dad loved to laugh. He loved humor. He had a lot of great friends that were very quick-witted, and they loved telling stories together. And I know we shared a story together probably about 15 years ago. So it goes that Mom and Dad were in Dublin, Ireland for the weekend, and the taxi driver they had was like a total hoot. They just were having a great time with them. And the driver said to my dad, he says, "Mr. Shea, I got a riddle for you. If it's not me sister and it's not me brother, but the child of me father and mother, who is it?" My dad says, "Well, I don't know." "So well, it's me, Mr. Shea, it's me." My dad says, "Well, okay. So he comes back in the States, he's playing golf with his buddy Bob right here at Sarahberry Country Club. Says, "Thanks, Bob, for asking about the trip. It was magnificent. And that taxi driver in Dublin, oh, he was a hoot. And he told us a riddle. If it's not my sister and it's not my brother, but the child of my father and mother, who is it?" Bob says, "Well, that's easy, Jack, it's you." My dad says, "No, it's a taxi driver from Dublin."
What I remember most about my father was the fact that he was a man of incredible integrity, strong character, honest, and very fair. I believe Jack Shea learned these things during two segments of his life when he was a young man: the military and the Boy Scouts of America. I don't know much about Dad's history in the service and what he did, but I do know that the military teaches discipline and instills it in the young men and women today. The Boy Scouts of America teach life's lessons through morals and scruples and the right way to do things. The Boy Scouts' motto was to be prepared. And I can assure you, during my lifetime, I don't think I ever saw my dad unprepared. I also think about the Boy Scouts' 12 segments of the Boy Scout law. And when I think of those, I reflect upon my father. I'd like to say that Jack Shea's legacy, his time on earth with us, the memories, and everything else, including his spirit, will be with us forever. And I want to thank you, Big D, for all the things you did for me, my family, my brothers and their families, and all your grandchildren and everybody else whose lives you touched.
He was a lifelong learner. He at one point had completed, I think, 2 or 3 volumes of Shakespeare written in the vernacular. He enjoyed live performance in particular. He'd often go to the Oslo or the Van Wezel on his own if he couldn't get somebody to go with him. He had a love of travel. He and Mom went all over the world together.
He was a complicated, simple man, capable of so many things and humble in all of his achievements. And when he was off duty, though, in the service of mankind, he could be a great deal of fun. He always enjoyed every moment of every day and lived by that principle. And it was inspiring to be a part of that and to have been his friend. Jack and I were pals. He called me pal, and I really loved that guy.
Anthology of Reflections, Volume 2. We are pleased to present the second volume of the poetry composed by John J. Shea.
Dawn at Sky Valley. At first, the silhouette of 4.
My dad was a great poet, and several years ago I actually wrote a poem about him. I think it sort of fits about what his life was about. Here's a toast to St. Jack, an Irish lad who took no slack. He raised 6 kids with love and kind fare. A family man like him is quite extraordinaire. He was a CPA, hole-in-one golfer, and a poet. in case you didn't know it. So let's raise our glasses to Big D, someone we should all inspire to be. Thank you, Pop.